你让我来救你的命，最好说声请字。
这次猎杀天魔教主，江湖上的同道几乎都出动了。
龙胖，拦住他！
既然来杀我，为何还要见礼？还有一位，也请现身吧。
Hello guys, how's everyone doing? Welcome back to my channel. Today we're checking out the Tales of Herding Gods episode 80 spoiler. This part gets pretty interesting, so I thought, why not share it with you guys? Alright then, let's jump straight into the story. Little Jade Capital. In the sky, the Imperial Preceptor's wife slowly lifted her gaze toward the heavens, almost whispering the name to herself. And honestly, it did sound beautiful. Little Jade Capital. Just hearing it, you could almost picture it, right? A city carved entirely from jade, floating somewhere beyond the mortal world. The kind of place where immortals lived, untouched by smoke, fire, or the messy chaos of human life. But the eternal peace Imperial Preceptor didn't look impressed. If anything, his eyes carried a strange weight, like he was still trying to solve a puzzle. Once, Wanderer Zen walked out of that mysterious Little Jade Capital to stop me, he said calmly. Then he paused for a moment, but unfortunately for him, he failed. Before he died, Wanderer Zen had left him with a final message, one that clearly stuck with him. Go to Little Jade Capital. Apparently, there were things there, things that might change the Preceptor's mind. And now, well, here he was. Right in front of them, slowly emerging from the mist, was something that looked almost unreal. A paradise straight out of a fairy tale. Beautiful, quiet, otherworldly. Meanwhile, far away from all that mystery, Qinmu's treasure ship had just arrived at Fen Prefecture. Now this place was surprisingly peaceful considering everything going on. Qinmu stepped off the ship with Hulinger, and the two of them started buying New Year's goods. A lot of them. I mean, they practically filled the entire ship. Fen Prefecture's magistrate was busy gathering divine arts practitioners, asking them to craft spirit weapons before loading them onto flying ships to deal with the strange dark cloud hanging over the sky. And interestingly, in some places, sunlight had finally started breaking through. The snow was melting, but somehow everything still felt even colder. Fen Prefecture was famous for its strong alcohol, so the locals relied on it to fight the brutal cold. Even in that freezing weather, villagers could be seen climbing up the mountains to chop wood for fire. But there was another problem quietly creeping in. Prices were skyrocketing. Qinmu didn't notice it at first. After all, he had money. But Hulinger? Oh, she definitely noticed. After doing some quick calculations, she looked up at him and said, "Young master, the prices have multiplied." Qinmu blinked in surprise. Earlier than I expected. He didn't look too worried, though. Stabilizing prices is the Minister of Revenue's job, he said casually. As long as the dark cloud clears and the Imperial Court sends disaster relief, the North should be fine. Then he paused slightly. Unless someone decides to stir up trouble on purpose. And honestly, that sounded like a very real possibility. Since they couldn't buy enough supplies there, the treasure ship soon stopped again at Li Prefecture. But things here were worse. Prices had inflated several times over, and merchants were hoarding goods like crazy, waiting for prices to rise even higher before selling. Basically, disaster profiteering. Not exactly the best timing. Luckily, the magistrate of Li Prefecture wasn't playing games. During times like these, punishments were brutal. Merchants caught hoarding supplies were dragged away and executed on the spot. Yeah, things were getting serious. A few days later, Qinmu's treasure ship finally arrived at Jing Prefecture, not too far from the Great Ruins. This place was different. It was much farther away, with vast stretches of land and far fewer people. And because of that, chaos had already begun. Mountain bandits had started robbing wealthy families. Along the frozen roads, Qinmu could see the bodies of poor people who had frozen to death beside cold, extinguished fire pits. That sight alone was enough to make anyone pause. But the most heartbreaking scene was the refugees. Entire families were dragging themselves through the endless snow, walking across frozen rivers and icy plains, all heading south, looking for warmth, looking for hope. They walked silently. Every now and then, someone would fall behind. No one said anything. Those who fell would squat down for just a moment, trying to gather the last bit of warmth left in their bodies. But once they sat down, they never stood up again. Even the frozen rivers had transformed into massive mountains of ice. From time to time, the ice would creak loudly, and huge chunks would suddenly slide off, crashing down with terrifying force. It was a brutal world out there. But then Qinmu noticed something interesting. Among the refugees were a few young people who clearly knew spells. They were using their abilities to help the migrating families survive. Curious, Qinmu landed his ship on the frozen river and asked them a few questions.
Turns out they were disciples of the Heavenly Devil Cult. After hearing the situation, Qin simply said, "Tell them to stop searching for warmth. Everywhere is frozen." But the disciple just shook his head. They won't listen. He removed the mask covering his face, revealing skin that had turned dark red from the biting cold. The wind howled around them as he spoke to his young cult master. If these people stop walking, they'll lose their hope. He looked toward the endless line of refugees motoring through the snow. But as long as they keep walking, they can still believe that somewhere ahead, there's warmth waiting for them.
Qin froze for a second when he heard that. Not because of the cold. Well, okay, the cold was definitely brutal. But because those words hit harder than he expected. People were walking through a frozen wasteland, not because they knew there was warmth ahead, but because they needed to believe there was. For a moment, Qin didn't say anything. Then he quietly reached into the treasure ship and pulled out some of the New Year supplies they had bought earlier. Thick clothes, warming items, things that could help people survive the cold. He handed them over to the disciples of the Heavenly Devil Cult. "Distribute these to the people who need them," he said. Then he paused, glancing at the endless snowfields. With the entire empire buried in ice and snow, demons and monsters will start coming out to hunt for food. His expression turned serious. "You all need to be extra careful." After that, Qin didn't stay in Jing Prefecture for long. The treasure ship lifted back into the sky and began heading toward the Great Ruins. And the farther they traveled, the worse the winter became. This wasn't normal cold anymore. This was the kind of cold that felt almost unnatural. As time passed, the temperature kept dropping, and before long, thick icicles started forming all over the treasure ship. Its speed slowed dramatically. Even worse, the consumption of medicinal stones, the fuel keeping the ship running, was increasing rapidly. Every few thousand miles, Qin had no choice but to land the ship, climb out, and smash away the heavy icicles. Only after clearing them off could the ship retain its speed. Inside the ship, Hulinger stood beside the pill furnace, feeding medicinal stones into it one after another to keep the engines burning. Meanwhile, Qin kept the ship flying low through the sky. To fight the freezing cold, he circulated his vital qi and transformed it into vermilion bird vital qi, surrounding his body with blazing heat. Flames flickered around him like a living shield, barely keeping the icy wind from freezing him solid. And as they traveled farther west, the land became more and more desolate. And the more desolate it became, the more refugees they saw. People fleeing, people starving, people frozen on the roadside. In places where civilization barely existed, there were also fewer divine arts practitioners, which meant no one was clearing the dark clouds covering the sky. Those regions were still buried under thick black clouds that blocked the sunlight completely. And without sunlight, the cold only became worse. At this point, even Qin was starting to realize something. This snow disaster was far more terrifying than he had imagined. More people were dying than he had estimated, and the cold was still getting stronger. Then suddenly, boom, flames exploded across the sky. Qin's eyes widened as a massive snake burst out of the clouds, twisting through the air like a living mountain. Fire poured from its mouth as it blasted flames, forcing the freezing air away. And the demonic aura pouring off that creature? Yeah, this was definitely not something friendly. Qin's heart jumped. Without hesitation, he pushed the treasure ship upward, steering it straight into the clouds to hide. Below, the giant snake slithered through the sky, scanning the surroundings. Standing on top of its head was a strangely handsome man with a flirtatious expression. The man frowned slightly. I clearly saw that brat ship just now. Where did it go? Then he turned his head slightly. Sister Q, release the insects. Oh, great. That didn't sound good. A cloud of insects suddenly burst into the air, revealing a woman standing calmly within them. With just a flick of her finger, the countless insects scattered in all directions, burrowing through the clouds like a living search network. Meanwhile, Qin's treasure ship was silently moving through the thick fog of clouds, when suddenly, right in front of them, a golden insect appeared. Both sides froze. The insect seemed just as shocked as Qin. For a split second, the world went completely still. Then Qin reacted first. He thrust his finger forward, and a sharp strand of sword chi shot out, striking the insect's body with a metallic clang. But instead of dying, the insect suddenly expanded. In an instant, it grew nearly 3 yards long, letting out a sharp squeal as it lunged toward him. Seriously? Qin immediately channeled his vital qi into Taoti's sack, and with a sharp whiz, the junior protector sword shot out. Slash. The giant insect was sliced clean in half, but at that exact moment, a chuckle echoed through the clouds. So the cult master of Heavenly Devil Cult is here. Qin turned toward the voice, and the moment he saw the clouds behind him turning bright red, his expression changed instantly. Not good. Linger! He shouted. Push all 3 pill furnaces to maximum. The next moment, boom, a massive wave of flames erupted through the clouds and slammed directly into the bow of the treasure ship. The entire vessel shook violently. Qin grabbed the helm immediately to keep himself from being thrown off. For a terrifying moment, the treasure ship tilted so badly it almost fell straight out of the sky. Below the ship, the bronze beast mechanisms roared to life, spewing fire at full power. The ship's speed skyrocketed. In just a few breaths, the treasure ship blasted through the clouds and burst out into open air. So cold. The words practically slipped out of Qin's mouth before he could stop them. The icy wind slammed straight into his face like a wall, and even with vermilion bird vital qi blazing around his body, he couldn't stop himself from shivering. The flames surrounding him started fading under the brutal cold, and before he knew it,
Thin layers of ice had already formed on his face and hands. Seriously, this winter was insane. Then, boom! A massive shockwave exploded behind them as the treasure ship broke the sound barrier. The entire vessel shot forward like a meteor. Inside the ship, Hu Linger quickly turned down the pill furnaces powering the bronze beast engines below the deck. The flames blasting from their mouths immediately shrunk. "Young master," she called out, sounding worried. "We don't have many medicinal stones left." That was not good. Qin turned back to look behind them. Through the clouds, he could still see fire bursting in the distance. The giant snake had chased out of the clouds, following the massive swarm of golden insects that were rushing in their direction. But luckily, they were much slower. Even though the treasure ship's speed had dropped a little, there was still no way those things were catching up anytime soon. Qin finally relaxed slightly and wrapped his vital tea around the ship for stability before stepping into the hold. "How many medicinal stones do we have left?" he asked. Hu Linger didn't answer immediately. She was still busy feeding stones into the furnace, but she puffed her cheeks and pointed toward the baskets nearby. Qin walked over and frowned. Almost all of the baskets were empty. Only 1.5 remained. The medicinal stones used by Eternal Peace Empire's flying ships were specially prepared, each wrapped neatly in craft paper. Normally, you just toss packet after packet into the furnace, and the ship would keep flying without any problem. They had originally bought more than a dozen baskets, more than enough to reach the Great Ruins. But the problem was the cold. Every time the ship slowed down because of ice buildup, Qin had to stop and melt the icicles off the hull, and that process burned through their fuel fast. Hu Linger sighed. "The weather's too cold. If we keep running the pill furnaces at maximum power," she said quietly, "I don't think we'll make it to the Great Ruins." And right at that moment, boom! The treasure ship suddenly shook violently. Qin immediately rushed out of the hold, but the second he opened the door, he slammed it shut again. Clink, clink, clink. A barrage of sharp impacts hammered against the ship as over a dozen flying swords stabbed straight into the hull. Well, that escalated quickly. Qin kicked the door open again and stepped onto the deck. Above them in the sky, a sword pellet was spinning rapidly, controlling countless flying swords that had pierced into the ship's structure. The blades trembled violently, trying to pull themselves free and return to the spinning pellet. Hack sword form. Qin raised his hand and chopped downward. The junior protector sword flashed through the air. Slash. The spinning sword pellet split apart instantly. It exploded into pieces, and a rain of broken flying swords fell from the sky. "Superb sword," a voice echoed through the air. Qin looked up, and what he saw was honestly kind of crazy. A young scholar was running through the sky toward them, 10,000 feet above the ground, running through the air, and he was fast. Every few steps, divine arts exploded behind him like miniature boosters, launching him forward again and again. The scholar smiled calmly as he spoke. "Heavenly Devil Cult's Cult Master Quan, your identity has already been revealed, and the road ahead of you will be quite bumpy." Then he added, almost teasingly, "There are plenty of Dao friends waiting for you up ahead." Yeah. That didn't sound friendly at all. Qin eyes narrowed. Without a word, he extended his hand. The junior protector sword flashed forward again like a streak of cold lightning, slicing straight toward the scholar. The scholar swung his wide sleeves to block it confidently. But the moment the sword light pierced through the fabric, his expression changed. Oh! Clearly he hadn't expected that. He quickly flicked his fingers, unleashing another divine art. From his fingertips burst dozens of flying sparrows that rushed toward the sword. Qin sword finger rotated smoothly, spiral sword form. The sword spun violently through the air, shredding every single flying sparrow. The intense heat turned the blade glowing red, but it didn't stop. Instead, the sword kept spinning around the scholar again and again. When it finally stopped, the scholar was just floating there, completely naked. All of his clothes had been sliced away. For a moment, the sky went very quiet. Then the scholar burst out laughing. Superb sword skill. He immediately backed away, putting distance between himself and the treasure ship. Qin could feel that his vital key thread had already reached its limit, so he pulled out the sword sheath and flicked it into the air. The sheath transformed into a fish dragon, opening its mouth wide. The junior protector sword shot back like a meteor and was swallowed instantly. Just as things seemed to calm down, a deep voice echoed from above. Amitabha. Qin heart skipped. He looked up. Blinding sunlight flooded his vision, and inside that blazing light, he could barely make out the shape of something enormous. A giant golden Buddha. It was descending from the sky, glowing with overwhelming brilliance as it fell straight toward the treasure ship. Qin reacted instantly. His vital key erupted, and the junior protector sword shot out again. Drill sword form. The sword turned into a spinning drill of light and stabbed straight toward the descending Buddha. But before it could reach, a thunderous shout echoed across the sky. Vajra unbeatable. And suddenly, everything slowed. The drill sword form that had been moving like lightning suddenly became incredibly sluggish. A terrifying pressure crashed down from the sky. It slammed into Qin body, forcing its way through him and into the treasure ship itself. His bones creaked under the weight. The entire treasure ship groaned loudly and began sinking downward through the sky.
This monk
is an expert. Kinmu let out a low grunt as the pressure from above kept pushing down harder and harder. His whole body trembled under the weight of it, but then suddenly, his form shifted. In an instant, he transformed into the Mars Sovereign. Now that was a sight. A towering figure with a bull's head, standing proudly on 2 coiling dragons. As the Overlord Body 3 elixir technique began circulating through his body, following the rhythm of the Mars Fire Marquee True technique, Kinmu's vital key surged explosively. It was like a furnace had just ignited inside him. And suddenly, the crushing pressure from the sky didn't seem so overwhelming anymore. Then, the third eye in the center of his forehead snapped open. A beam of blazing fire shot straight upward. Boom! A pained grunt echoed from above. The enormous blazing sun floating behind the giant Buddha's head was pierced by the beam instantly. It cracked, shattered, and collapsed. And just like that, the huge Buddha illusion disappeared. In its place stood a young monk. The moment the illusion broke, the crushing pressure on Kinmu immediately weakened. The flames around his body spread across the entire treasure ship, melting away the thick icicles that had frozen onto its surface. Finally, the ship could move freely again. With a powerful burst of speed, the treasure ship shot forward and plunged back into the clouds. Up in the air behind them, the tall and sturdy monk hovered on one leg, gripping a 9-ringed monk staff. Blood dripped slowly from his other leg. He looked around calmly, but it was obvious what had happened. Earlier, he had used the Vajra Unbeatable technique to block Kinmu's drill sword form head-on. The leg he used to intercept the attack was now badly mangled. Apparently, even Vajra Unbeatable couldn't completely stop that sword strike. And then Kinmu's Mars Sovereign form had shattered the Buddha illusion entirely, forcing the monk to retreat. But the monk wasn't giving up yet. Over there, his eyes lit up the moment he spotted the treasure ship again. He stepped forward onto the clouds, and something incredible happened. Every time his foot touched the air, a white lotus bloomed beneath it, forming a temporary platform. Using those lotus flowers as stepping stones, he sprinted through the sky with explosive bursts of speed. Honestly, it looked both majestic and terrifying. Ahead of him, hidden within the sea of clouds, Kinmu's treasure ship could barely be seen. Kinmu glanced back, and yeah, the monk was still coming, fast. At that moment, Kinmu's expression grew more serious. The people who had ambushed him today were no ordinary opponents. Long Jiaonan and that woman named Q were already terrifying. Both of them were divine arts practitioners of the 7 Stars realm. But the scholar from earlier, and this monk chasing him now, they weren't simple either. That scholar had his sword pellet destroyed by Kinmu, yet even without a spirit weapon, he had managed to block the junior protector sword with his bare hands. Sure, his clothes were shredded to pieces, but his body was completely unharmed. Think about that for a second. The junior protector sword belonged to a first-rank Imperial official. Even though Kinmu couldn't fully unleash its power, it was still unbelievably sharp. For someone to defend against it like that, yeah, that guy was terrifyingly strong, and the monk chasing him now wasn't any weaker. The fact that he could take Kinmu's drill sword form head-on and only lose the use of one leg showed just how insanely tough his body was. If Kinmu hadn't realized that the glowing sun behind the Buddha's head was the weak point of the Vajra Unbeatable technique, the treasure ship probably would have already been crushed out of the sky. These two might not be in the 7 Stars realm, but they were definitely at the peak of the 6 Directions realm. Even with one injured leg, the monk kept running across the clouds, getting closer and closer to the ship. Yeah, he was actually catching up. Kinmu immediately shouted toward the hold. "Linger, increase the speed." Who Linger didn't hesitate. The pill furnaces roared louder, and the treasure ship slowly accelerated again. Bit by bit, the distance between them and the monk began to widen. Eventually, the monk stopped chasing. He watched the ship disappear into the distance and sighed with admiration. What a fast ship. But seeing that reaction didn't make Kinmu feel relieved. Not even a little. Instead, his heart sank. Because both the scholar and the monk had suddenly stopped chasing, which meant something very simple. They were confident Kinmu couldn't escape anyway, and that could only mean one thing. There were more experts waiting ahead. The treasure ship continued flying forward for a while. Then its speed began to drop again. Inside the furnace room, the flame burned weaker and weaker. The reason? They were almost out of medicinal stones. If they kept pushing the furnaces at full power now, the fuel would be completely exhausted, and the ship wouldn't even make it to the Great Ruins.
As long as we fly out of the area covered by this cloud, we'll reach the territory of the Great Ruins. And once we're there, the village is only about 1,000 miles away. That was the goal. Simple enough, right? But when Qin dismissed his Mars Sovereign form and stepped to the bow of the treasure ship to check their surroundings, he frowned because this cloud sea just kept going. No end in sight. The ship was still moving fast, slicing through the sky. And although the freezing wind kept smashing into his face, it was at least bearable now. Then suddenly, Qin noticed something strange. Above the bright white sea of clouds, about 12 miles ahead, colorful lights were spinning in the air, scattering in every direction. At first glance, it almost looked beautiful, like some strange rainbow storm floating in the sky. But as the treasure ship got closer, Qin finally saw what it actually was. Ice pillars. massive ones. They rose from the clouds like enormous ice swords, each one thick enough that it would take more than a dozen people holding hands to wrap around it. And when sunlight struck them, the light refracted into dazzling colors that scattered across the clouds. It was breathtaking, but also extremely suspicious, because those swords weren't just standing there. They were spinning upright in the air, and that made one thing very clear. These things didn't form naturally. Qin Mu's expression immediately changed. Oh no. Without hesitation, he jerked the helm hard to the right. The metal treasure ship tilted sharply, so sharply that the deck was almost vertical against the sea of clouds. The ship slid across the sky in a huge arc, barely slipping past the towering ice pillars. "Linger, pill furnaces to full power," Qin Mu shouted. From inside the hold, Hu Linger's voice came back full of complaints. "Young master, you keep telling me to push it to full power. If we keep doing that, we seriously won't make it back to the Great Ruins. We barely have any medicinal stones left." But Qin Mu didn't answer. He steadied the helm and brought the ship back upright, and that's when it happened. To the left side of the ship, the giant ice swords moved. It was like some invisible giant with dozens of arms had suddenly grabbed them and pulled them free. The enormous ice blades swung through the air with terrifying whistles as they slashed straight toward the ship. "Here they come!" The treasure ship surged forward again as Qin Mu desperately steered to dodge the incoming blades. He glanced back quickly, and that's when he saw her. Standing among the towering ice swords was a woman in a blue dress. She was breathtakingly beautiful, but her expression was colder than the ice around her. Her vital cube glowed with a water blue color, forming over a dozen phantom arms behind her. Each time those arms thrust forward like sword strikes, the massive ice swords followed the same motion. One stab, one slash, one deadly attack after another. Qin Mu narrowed his eyes. Luckily, she can't catch up to me. But the moment that thought crossed his mind, the woman's speed suddenly exploded. She shot forward across the clouds like a streak of blue lightning. And as she sprinted, her many arms continued stabbing forward rapidly. Qin Mu blinked. Wait, and then, boom. A massive crash exploded beneath the ship. The entire treasure ship shook violently and spun wildly through the sky. Qin Mu barely managed to grab the helm before being thrown overboard. When the ship finally stabilized, he realized what had happened. More ice swords were suddenly growing out of the cloud surface. The ship had slammed directly into one of them. Sure, the ice swords shattered into pieces, but the ship had taken serious damage too. Qin Mu clenched his teeth. This woman is incredibly strong. Honestly, even stronger than that monk earlier. And she was fast, really fast. Now more and more ice swords were erupting from the cloud sea, turning the sky into a deadly forest of blades. Dodging them was getting harder by the second. Finally, Qin Mu shouted angrily, "Where's Duten Devil King?" A lazy voice answered from the hold. "What are you calling me for?" Out walked Duten Devil King, looking completely relaxed, with an expression that clearly said, "Even if you kill me, I'm not helping." Qin Mu's temper instantly flared. "Do you want to kneel down and lick my toes again? If not, get over here and help," Duten Devil King sneered. "You think I'm scared of you?" But despite his attitude, he still walked over. "I'm the ruler of Duten after all. If you want my help, you should at least say please." Veins popped out on Qin Mu's forehead. "Please," the Devil King grinned happily. "Ah, so the day finally comes when you lower your head to me." Seeing Qin Mu about to explode again, he quickly stopped teasing. Soon, strange devil language began echoing from his mouth, faster and faster. The 8-armed, 4-faced Devil King raised his arms high. Above the ship, a black mirror appeared in the sky. Then, a thick beam of black light blasted downward into the sea of clouds. It was like someone had poured ink into a clear basin of water. Black fog exploded outward in every direction. Within seconds, the area for over a dozen miles was swallowed by dark devil smoke. Even the woman in blue was completely engulfed. Inside the fog, she suddenly groaned. Her heartbeat became chaotic. Dark thoughts flooded her mind, like ink spreading through clear water. Even her perfectly disciplined Dao heart started wavering. Her technique, the secrets of hatred parting heavenly sword, was supposed to separate emotions like love and hatred from her mind, keeping her sword heart pure. But now, that purity was being stained. Desires and impulses she had long suppressed started rising again. Duten Devil King sighed dramatically. What a pity. If I had more time, I could turn this icy woman into someone begging to lick my toes in half a day. But just then, a powerful Buddhist chant echoed through the black fog. The tall monk had arrived again. Without a word, he swung his 9-ringed monk staff. Brilliant light exploded from the weapon, blasting outward in every direction. The devil fog split apart instantly and began dispersing. But the moment the fog cleared,
The monk suddenly felt something soft fall straight into his arms. His calm Buddhist mind nearly collapsed because the person who had fallen against him was the cold woman from Passion Parting Palace, and right now, her clothes were half open, as if she was moments away from tearing them off completely.
The monk reacted instantly. He pushed the woman away almost as if he'd been burned and shouted loudly, his voice booming with Buddhist energy. "Senior Sister Yu, you've fallen under the spell of the devil path. Wake up!" That shout wasn't just normal yelling either. It carried the power of Buddhist sound, like a bell ringing straight inside the mind, and it worked. The woman in the blue dress, Yue, suddenly froze. The chaos in her mind cleared in an instant, and the devilish thoughts that had been twisting around her heart scattered like smoke in the wind. She blinked, and then reality hit her. Her face immediately turned bright red. Oh no. She quickly pulled her clothes together, covering herself in embarrassment. "I'm sorry," she said, clearly mortified. "I fell under the spells of the devil path and let them escape." The young monk shook his staff lightly, the golden rings clinking together with a crisp sound. The gentle Buddhist rhythm helped steady her mind even further. "Heavenly Devil Cult Master Chinmu," he said firmly, "is naturally skilled in devilish arts that confuse the heart and corrupt cultivation." He tapped his monk staff once on the cloud beneath him. "But with this little monk here, he won't be able to go too far." Yue sighed and shook her head slightly. "His ship is too fast," she admitted. "If he escapes, it won't be easy to catch him again." Before the monk could answer, a calm voice suddenly spoke behind them. "There's no need to worry, Senior Sister Yu. He won't escape." They turned around. A young scholar had just arrived, stepping lightly across the clouds as if it were nothing. He cupped his hands politely. "Poor Logic Sex Teacher Kor's disciple, Scholar Lan Yu, greets Senior Brother Ban Shi and Senior Sister Yu." So the monk's name was Ban Shi. Lan Yu smiled calmly as he continued. "It's not just us hunting the Heavenly Devil Cult Master." He glanced toward the distant clouds. "Almost everyone at our level has made a move." Then his smile widened slightly. "A net has already been laid, a net he cannot escape." Monk Ban Shi was about to respond, but suddenly something strange appeared in the distance. A swarm of insects surged across the sky like a black storm cloud, and inside that swarm, a massive red snake slithered forward, its body coiled with thick demonic aura. It was moving extremely fast. They'd reach them in no time. Lan Yu took one look and immediately recognized them. "That's Senior Sister Yu from Three Wonder Castle, and Long Jia Nan from the Dragon Rider sect." Then his expression changed slightly. "Long Jia Nan's temper is strange." He coughed awkwardly. "He likes men. When he saw that I was handsome earlier, he chased me for half the day." He waved his hand quickly. "Let's not meet him." Honestly, yeah, that sounded like a good plan. But just as they were about to leave, something else caught their attention. Far away in the clouds, countless sword lights suddenly crisscrossed the sky, flashing brilliantly like a storm of stars. Monk Ban Shi's eyes lit up. "Oh, I wonder which sword sex expert has intercepted the Heavenly Devil Cult Master." He tightened his grip on the staff. "Let's hurry and join them." Everyone nodded immediately. But just as they started moving, they spotted a figure leaping across the clouds like a wild ape, chasing after the treasure ship in the distance. Lan Yu recognized him instantly. "Oh, that's Yarn Shan, the young swordsman of Duke Ape Sword Sect." Lan Yu quickly shouted toward him. "Senior Brother Yarn Shan, the Heavenly Devil Cult Master can't escape. Why don't we join forces and surround him together?" Yarn Shan stopped and waited for them to catch up. His expression was not great. "There's a treasure sword in Chinmu's hands," he said bluntly. "My sword pellet was destroyed by him." That alone was already shocking. But he wasn't finished. "And his ship is strange," Yarn continued. "It's not made of wood." Everyone looked confused. "What do you mean?" "It's metal," Yarn said. "I attacked it with thousands of flying swords, but I couldn't destroy it." Yue nodded. "It's made from black iron," she added calmly. "When it collided with my hatred-carting ice sword, the ice sword shattered, but the ship didn't." For a moment, everyone just stared at each other. An iron ship? Flying in the sky? That shouldn't even be possible. Lan Yu frowned slightly and glanced behind them. Then suddenly his expression changed. "Long Jia Nan is coming." He turned immediately. "Let's move. Quickly." So guys, that was the episode 80 spoiler. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit the like button and tell me in the comments which episode you want next. And if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Bye guys!